In October 1974, in a hail of powerhouse rock and roll and a fog of crabby production, the second Kiss album, Hotter Than Hell, is released. Just 8 months after their debut, like a mastodon struggling through quicksand, Hotter Than Hell is darker, gloomier, heavier, and more muscular than Kiss, with even worse production. Kiss was recorded at Bell Sound Studios, New York. Producers Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise had since relocated to Los Angeles, and maybe it was this change of studio that produced the strangely hypnotic guitars and drums like cardboard boxes. Paul Stanley's mid-tempo ultimatum, "GotToChoose," opens the album. His inspiration from the band Boomerang's cover of Wilson Pickett's. The intro riff features a pedaled chord progression, with each guitarist doing a unison bend on a harmony note. Amid the clear two-part harmonies between Paul and Gene, Paul low-key shows off his vocal prowess, the melody in each line jumping up a fifth. He's telling his girlfriend that he doesn't mind someone else has come along. The easygoing rock star lifestyle. But to match the chunky riff, a nice languid solo by Ace Frehley. Hearing the song live, the actual lyric is, "Someone's come along and shares your time." But every lyric sheet shows "shared your time." When we were younger, without the benefit of so many live internet versions, I also thought Paul said shared, which he pronounced like shed, which reminds us of
Arthur, 2 Sheds, Jackson.
In the end, we've got to choose. Do we believe what our eyes are telling us our ears can't hear?
Look, forget about the shed. What's that got to do with my bloody music?
The Les Paul wielding pentatonic space traveler Ace Frehley pens Parasite, a diabolical chromatic riff about a clingy girlfriend. The riff sounds like it starts on E, but Kiss are tuned down a semitone, so Ace is playing it on F, F sharp, G. To audition for Kiss, Ace answered Kiss's ad in the Village Voice. Lead guitarist wanted with flash and ability. Not, as Paul and Gene used to claim,
guitar player wanted with flash and balls.
Sure, they probably submitted balls, but the paper printed ability. Ace had the flash and ability, but I had no confidence in my vocals, especially around Paul and Gene and Peter, who thrived in the spotlight and had a way of pushing through a song regardless of any vocal limitations. So Ace requested Gene on Parasite vocals, which are doubled on the track to add body. Ace would go on to sing Parasite himself in his solo bands. There is a cool feature moment that leads into the guitar solo, a kind of pick slide into a drum fill with a remnant of a scream behind it. A really creative production moment. This guitar solo is the closest Ace has come to shredding, especially with the single note repetitions. That's flash. Meanwhile, Peter Criss stacks snare fills on top of snare fills behind the solo, driving this already trucking song forward and upward. And after the solo, it doesn't go back into the song or repeats the chorus, it just ends. That's balls. Look, up in the sky. It's a love song. It's a ballad. No, it's a dirge. Written by Gene Simmons and Stephen Coronel back in Wicked Lester, GoinBlind is an epic orchestral beast. The bass creating the melody line, the guitars strumming steel behind it, with little faux Japanese licks throughout. Or is it just the sleeve art mesmerizing us into turning Japanese? Well, if you play just the pentatonic minor scale notes in any key, it's always going to sound Japanese. Simmons choking out the lyrics. In later years, learning a gentler approach without the growl. Either tragic or disturbing, depending on how you view this love that cannot be. Simmons laments, "There is nothing more for you and I." With Paul Stanley contributing the lyric that really kicks GoinBlind into bizarre. I'm rather 3, you're 16. Not just a man metaphorically losing sight of his world, but a literal old man in love with a woman he tragically should never have, and, presumably due to his age, literally going blind. Ironic that the song's co-writer, Kerner, was arrested in 2014. Ace Frehley stamps a wailing, grieving solo on this dirge. Dale Crover of the Melvins, who had recorded a cover of GoinBlind in 1993, tells a story about being backstage with Kiss.
Bruce has always been really nice, and he's the one that said, "You guys doing that song actually influenced us to play that song live. We influenced Kiss. Hey, how cool."
Unfortunately, the Melvins' super grunge version of GoinBlind did not end up on the tribute album Kiss My Ass in 1994. For business reasons, Dinosaur Jr.'s version. But Dale and the boys, giant Kiss fans, got a much better tale to take into their old age, not only opening a few shows on the Kiss reunion tour in 1996, but having Gene once perform GoinBlind with them out of pure love for their band.
How cool.
The album's title track opens with a mighty gapped riff that songwriter Paul Stanley admits to copying from Free's All Right Now. About a woman who is so hot, she's hotter than the hottest place that Christians could ever conceive in their masochistic obeisance. As soon as Paul lays eyes on her, "I had to get on the case," which is a hilarious lyric. I had to get on the case. Still, not as funny as when Kiss went back to their adult roots in 1992 in looks and lyrics. "She had to sit on my face," reminding us that their middle colourful period where they appealed to kiddies was a stutter step in an otherwise raunchy R-rated career. The album cover is a prime example of that sleaze. Photographer Norman Seif, a former brain surgeon, inspired by working with Japanese graphic designer Yoko Tadanori, connected Kiss's kabuki-inspired look with its Japanese roots, employing designer John Van Hammersveld to emulate Tadanori's flair on the album cover, which includes a symbol that would erroneously be thought of as Kiss in Japanese. But it's called Shikara, meaning power and strength, and would find an appropriately powerful home on Eric Carr's thunderous drums in the far-flung future. And the back sleeve, nakedness, licentiousness, bacchanalia, with Seif creating a debauched ambience with groupies, body paint, and limitless liquor, although only Paul's and Peter's pics would give any indication of the full Caligula photo session, which would surface years later. The cover art made Kiss more gargantuan than Gojira when they toured Japan, on their second visit in '78, selling out Budokan Hall 5 times, a record previously held by the Beatles. The chorus turns into a jaunty march, with Criss adding that crazy swing of his that makes every early Kiss recording pop. And to introduce the guitar solo, Chris's gong. And a second heavy riff to accompany the outro solo, which is actually 2 solos cross-faded against each other to create a mayhemic effect, perfectly encapsulating the drunken, disheveled debauchery of the album package. Utterly inappropriate, intolerable, and ungodly. And hotter than hell. Let Me Go Rock and Roll is the only single released from the Hotter Than Hell album, backed with the title track. It failed to chart. Originally called Baby Let Me Go from Wicked Lester days, the song was demoed to be on the debut album, lyrics by Gene Simmons, music by Paul Stanley, the original show closer before Black Diamond, now renamed Unleashed Like a Beast Off the Chain. thick as syrup, hard as steel. No amount of shoddy production could disguise the ferocious chunk those Gibson guitars bring to one of Kiss's meatiest songs. Both Stanley's custom Flying V's were stolen before tracking this album, so he used his 72 Les Paul Custom and 64 Melody Maker D, while Frehley went OG with his usual weapon of choice, a sunburst Les Paul Standard. Simmons took the low road with a modified 1959 Gibson EBO bass. Frehley's directive for this song? Solo. Just solo. In every available breathing space, Ace rips out all the stops, giving Let Me Go Rock and Roll an urgency like a 21-year-old straining against the zipper of his denim Levi's. Never more apparent that Kiss is employing the term rock and roll in its original sense. Our enjoyment of the album, Hotter Than Hell, never suffered from its lackluster sonic quality, and we've grown accustomed to hearing it with that overarching hollowness. So much so that when Kiss remastered the album in 1997, it sounded like remastering engineer Joseph Palmaccio did to the album the original meaning of rock and roll. Ugly riff, handsome resolution. Written by Gene Simmons, AllTheWay is in A minor, but Kiss are tuned down a semitone, so the recording sounds like A flat. The first chord change is standard 1 to 4. But then they run through some kind of Phrygian mode on the G to create that off-color run. Then back to A, D. It's so ugly, it's beautiful. That's under the verses. The chorus modulates to E major, making the progression run a classic 1-4-5. That's why it sounds so expansive and glorious, before diving back into a tagline that takes them back to A minor. Even with the strange progression, lead guitarist Ace Frehley gets away with playing a straight A minor pentatonic solo over it. And from what I can tell, way back in 1974, it's about the first Karens.
Get off her car! Close the door, fat ass.
You don't see lawlessness. Electric car, large dog. Give me my bag, you don't start it.
Ugly riff, handsome resolution. Subscribe.
Please.
Argue.
You talking to me?
Donate.
For the love of God!
The freight train voyeurism of Watching You. One of the most evil-sounding Kiss songs written by Gene Simmons, like he's in a den of iniquity, watching something that the children who buy Kiss records shouldn't be watching. Ever since that SNL sketch, cowbells have become objects of derision. But unholy God, has there ever been a more immoral cowbell than right here? One of those pagan 70s sex parties, some naked woman swaying sensually drugged on a table. There's a lava lamp, there's an ass lamp, there's a gimp, there's a goat. Talk about jazz feel. With his ghost notes, Peter Criss almost sounds like he's playing with brushes. That's how much swing he puts into Watching You. And yet, it's heavier than a metric ton. The riff between verses goes for 4 bars, with the second bar having 4.5 beats. Watching you. Despite writing the 5, it's the first half of the 5 beat. In other words, 4.5 beats. So the bar is not 5-4, it's actually 9-8. The drums don't accentuate the 1 of the third bar, just gallop across nonchalantly, so you can't tell it's ended and another bar has begun. You just feel there's some odd timing sorcery going on. For the guitar solo, guitarists Frehley and Stanley harmonize the riff, while Frehley solos in a call and answer, all players exacting over the syncopated drumming, like a combination drum/guitar solo, and the salacious twist. Everybody else is here watching us! Which means not only are we witness to the devilish tableau, we are also on that freight train with Kiss and the Gimp and the Goat to a fate hotter than hell. Mainline, one of only 2 straight-ahead easy rockers on the Hotter Than Hell album. Written by Paul Stanley about putting the hard word on his girl. Featuring the inadvertently funny lyric, hot like an oven, like the doofus in The Incredible Melting Man. Peter Criss sings. As reported by Stanley and Simmons, Criss was in the habit of threatening either I sing that song or I'm quitting the band. I imagine Paul threw Peter a bone with Mainline just to stop the whining. Great voice, excellent drummer, no brain. Mainline opens with a cool riff in E, then modulates to D major for the body of the song. The opening riff bookends the song, the outro adding a compelling snare fill every 2 bars. Reminds us of the outro to Sweet Emotion, where the snare fills are part of the song's structure as opposed to just random fills. Ace Frehley throws down a classic blues solo. Once again, singable. Once again, an integral part of the song, not just flailing notes. Maybe as passive-aggressive punishment for Peter's puling, Mainline was performed live only once during the Hotter Than Hell tour. The most reasonable explanation for Paul naming the song after a junkie practice is that wanting a fix of his girl is akin to needing heroin. Naming a song Mainline definitely added to the mystique of early Kiss as being foreboding, dangerous, edgy, and from the streets. Hot like an oven, or hotter than hell. I hate it. MTV Unplugged. I love it. CominHome is a perfect example of what a difference good sonics make. Also, more suitable instrumentation. The muddy mix of the electric guitars on the album never did the song justice. 21 years later, on MTV Unplugged, Kiss would rework the song with electric acoustic guitars, and it is ear-opening. And I'm sure that Paul Stanley's decision to open Unplugged with this deep cut must have been because he heard how sonically pleasurable it was with this new instrumentation and crystal clear mix. And we can clearly hear Gene's great head voice harmonies. Honestly, when they launched into it, I didn't even recognize the song. That's how unfamiliar and fresh it sounded. CominHome was a road song Ace and I built around a damn good riff.
It's been a month or 2 since I've been sleeping with you. I'm coming home again. It's true. I'm not sure if you know.
The chorus walk down from the root follows all the rules pleasant to our Western ears. The 1-4-5 all major chords, the 3 and 6 both minors. No guitar solo, just background arpeggios during the walk. Tracks sound campfire comfy done this way. The unplugged format exposing the no-brains, all-heart pop craft of these songs. On the next album, Kiss would start using acoustic guitar beds to bring out the clarity of the songs. That technique was not known to them at the time of Hotter Than Hell's recording, but that knowledge allowed Stanley to resurrect CominHome 21 years on. Even though CominHome has the exuberance of a guy with a guitar in one hand, a suitcase in the other, jumping up and clicking his heels in the air.
It's been a month or two since I've been sleeping with you. I'm coming home again.
There's a flip side to coming home that Paul brings up in his own book more than once, of returning home from a tour and finding his woman distant, if not outright cheating on him, realizing that his honest mantra to his partners, "Don't ask me what happens on the road if you don't want to know," works both ways.
It's been a month or two since I've been sleeping with you.
Yeah, I know grunge started in the late 80s, but is this not grunge? Like trying to push a block of solid metal up a hill. Can anything possibly be grungier than this Sabbath-styled monster called StrangeWays? Closing out the Hotter Than Hell album in fresh psychotic. With a guitar solo that can only be described as warp factor insane. Ace writes, still vocal shy, opting for Peter's vocals. Peter had yet to contribute as a songwriter, not for Gene and Paul holding him down, but because he didn't play any melodic instrument, so just brought unfinished lyrics and hummed melodies, hardly worthwhile, with 3 other songwriters bringing full songs. So we see why Peter was so petulant about singing Paul and Gene songs, trying to compensate for his lack of writing. And his vocals were always good. The StrangeWays vocal is suitably jungle cat. Also the reason why Peter forced a drum solo onto StrangeWays. Compensating, Peter insisted on playing a long drum solo, and he was no John Bonham. It was ridiculous. Peter threatened to quit if the solo was cut. It was cut, and we can clearly hear the obvious edit directly after the guitar solo. Peter didn't quit. We wanted the entire band to sing, and we wanted everybody to write. We wanted to do it like the Beatles. Little did Simmons realize he and Stanley would become the Lennon-McCartney of hard rock. Well, hold on, think about it. Unlike the big 3, whose songwriting and power dynamics were totally different than the Beatles, Kiss resembled the Fab Four. Simmons and Stanley were the 2 main songwriters in the band. They were bassist and guitarist. They were both lead vocalists. They were the duo most responsible for the band's musical direction, image, and business ethos. Lennon and McCartney revolutionized popular music. Simmons and Stanley also created a revolution in music, in how it was marketed. In the rock world of 1974, Hotter Than Hell was not that brave an offering, and definitely not polished, considering it was up against killers like Burn, Houses of the Holy, Queen 2, Diamond Dogs, Get Your Wings, Secret Treaties, not to mention Lennon's Walls and Bridges and McCartney's Band on the Run. However, longevity casts a worthy glow over formative material, and Hotter Than Hell can be placed alongside these world shakers as the ugly duckling that grew up to be a demon prince. Share.
Do it.
Smash. Patreon.
You